hungry belly picnic day and show. Millions of them, lots of hungry belly picnic day and show. Living in a bamboo hut in a little old seaport town. Three kids on the floor and another one to complain for. Day by day, I man stepping along the seashore. Day by day, I man stepping along the seashore. Dear brother John, have you got any Welshman?
Yes, brother Peter.
Welshman's brother Macabre.
Yes, brother Peter.
Welshman's brother Macabre. Oh, fisherman bro, keep on rowing your boat. Brother man, row. Fisherman bro, we've got to reach an higher ground. Fisherman row, keep on rowing your boat. Brother man, row. Fisherman row, yes, we got to reach an higher ground. Brothers, we've got to reach an higher ground. James and John, from a shore to feed the hungry belly ones. James and John, from a shore to feed the hungry belly ones. So row, fisherman row, keep on rowing your boat. Brother man, row. Fisherman row, lots of hungry belly picnic day and show. Millions of them, lots of hungry belly picnic day and show.
But you take the collie bag, sell the best collie in Seaport Town. What you beg the collie bag, are the best collie weed in town.
Keep on rowing your boat. Brother man, row. Fisherman row. Lots of hungry belly picnic day and show. Millions of them, lots of hungry belly picnic day and show. Peter, James and John, oh my sure to feed the hungry belly one them. Peter, James and John, oh my sure to feed the hungry belly one. Fisherman row.
Oh, Manio, why did you go? Why did you go? You leave me all alone, lady. Please come home. Please, please, honey, let me roam. Oh, boom, 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 Manio. Someday, Manio, you can go. But now, I love you so. Hold me in your arms and never let me go. Squeeze me, you some more. Oh, Manio. Baby, come to me. All my life's in misery. Why must you leave me and go away? Oh, Manio, I love you so. Why did you go? Oh, heaven, babies, just for you. I don't know just what to do. Oh, Manio. Baby, come to me. All my life's in misery. Why must you leave me and go away? Oh, Manio, I love you so. Why did you come? Oh, heaven, ladies, just for you. I don't know just what to do. Oh, boom, 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 Manio.
Grinding test of attrition where the Ukraine war has become a grinding test of attrition where movement on the map is measured in meters, not miles. And in the frozen wastelands where the fight is being waged, it feels never ending.
On the grounds, the conflict feels less like grand strategy and more like a slog to survive. These soldiers are tasked with defending one of the most heavily contested areas of the Donbass, known as the Fortress Belts.
4 years in and fatigue is setting in. We are skirting around the front lines at the moment, and no longer can Ukrainian formations, it's simply too dangerous. The threat of attack from drones is ever present.
Just getting to positions has become a test of nerve. Going forward means moving on foot, often across open ground. It's terrifying.
Quick leaders FPV. We're just heading to a new frontline position, and we've been warned that there is a first-person view drone, an attack drone in the sky above us. So the soldier we're with has told us to wait here and just try and take some cover.
The soldiers scan the skies and use handheld drone detectors. It's now heading over our position and hunting for a target. The radio alerts us. It's tracking back. The drone detector doesn't stop bleeping. Our movement has been spotted. We hear it before we see it. It's getting closer and closer. Another soldier joins the fight, and then relief as we see the drone fall from the sky. But we need to move quickly as more may come, or artillery could be called in on our position.
So they've just shot down the drone and we've just been told the skies are clear again so that we can move forward.
A Ukrainian surveillance drone follows our progress as we get on quad bikes for the next leg of the journey to the village where the unit is stationed. Offering some protection, it is an eye in the sky. Speeding forward, smashed Ukrainian vehicles lie abandoned. A stark reminder of the danger we're heading into.
As drones have started to dominate the skies, Ukraine is now answering that threat with teams of drone hunters. And we're on our way now to meet some of them. Привет.
The small unit here is operating in the shadows, helping protect the logistical hub of Sloviansk, a key city for the entire defensive line.
We are just a few kilometers from Russian positions and we've joined an air defense unit and their mission is to shoot down attack drones as they come past. We're very close to one of the main supply roads here. And already, since we've been here, just in the last 10 minutes or so, we've heard 3 drones pass overhead.
Inside their bunker where they live and plan their missions, they show us a drone they shot down that morning. It's cheap, mass-produced, and deadly.
There are men working with pump-action shotguns because the drones fly at their lowest altitude there. That is within the effective range of a shotgun. But here, they fly higher and faster, so the Kalashnikov is the most effective weapon.
The drones are relentless, and the landscape here has been battered by this war. But the soldiers want to show us that, incredibly, in this hellscape, 2 people are still living.
Alexander тоже. Тоже.
Не надо меня фотографировать, не надо.
For 4 years, Alexander and his wife have survived under constant bombardment.
Страшно, ну живые.
А военным?
He tells me, of course they're frightened, but they have no money and nowhere to go. As we talk, we move for cover. Another drone has been spotted above us. For the men defending this territory, they know their work is perilous and also what's at stake.
Icy roads, sleeper drones, flying drones, and the Russians. It couldn't be more dangerous. There are threats from everywhere within seconds.
I first came across Ansarada in 2014. It was a corporate finance deal we were working on.
Life in eastern Ukraine is a desperate fight for survival. We're taken to a secret location deep in a forest. Access to the brigade's headquarters is heavily restricted, and as we we enter their bunker, we head deep underground. Inside, it's a labyrinth of screens and monitors, reflecting what this war has become. It's now a conflict of microchips and mud, a place where drones circle their prey and men do anything to survive. The commander shows us what's left of a group of Russian soldiers who were trying to use the mist to launch a probing attack. The surveillance drones and the algorithms see everything and everyone.
The war has changed fundamentally. We used to fight on horseback, so to speak. Now we fight in the sky. We're even taking down helicopters with drones. Not my brigade specifically, but there are units doing it.
They then conjure up another image of a water tube where Russian troops were spotted entering. Attack drones are called in. No one comes out.
Logistics are currently a nightmare because technology has evolved so much. Drones are flying almost everywhere. If the enemy spots a vehicle, it's highly likely to be quickly destroyed.
The 21st century has been fused with the muddied trenches of the First World War. It's grim and brutal.
The fighting here may seem remote to people thousands of miles away, but the implications are not. This war will determine whether might makes right in the 21st century. Whether international law is enforced or eroded. After 4 years of merciless combat, the battle for Ukraine is about more than territory. It's about the kind of world we get when the fighting stops.
Dozen of military targets across Tehran, including Iran's security headquarters. The US has struck an Iranian Navy ship off the coast of Sri Lanka. 140 people are thought to be missing after that attack. While Iran has targeted US allies across the Middle East, firing drones and missiles on Turkey, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. Inside Iran, there is a state-imposed internet shutdown with very little news coming out of the country. The death toll has surpassed 1,000 civilians since the conflict started on Saturday. The BBC has been in touch with people living in the Iranian capital. 2 men messaged us on Tuesday evening. And for security reasons, the original recordings can't be used and their names have been changed.
What we're experiencing now is beyond what we experienced during the 12-day war. The number of explosions, the destruction, what's happening, it's unbelievable. On the first day I went to work, that night they announced that Khamenei had been killed. That night was strange too. I live in the city centre, and when the news of his death was announced around 10:30 to 11 p.m, you could hear cheering and ululation from people. I didn't expect that kind of reaction. The city centre atmosphere after the attack was very security heavy, and it still is. Every day they send SMS messages warning that if we go outside, they'll deal with us harshly. Today, a message came saying that if anyone among you goes out and protests, we consider you Israeli collaborators.
When the war began, my life turned into a roller coaster ride. In the first 3 days, our city was heavily bombed, and we live in an area where fighter jets fly overhead. Friends carrying our emergency backpacks. We've been moving back and forth between their houses. Their house has a view of suffocation, being off from information. Our house with has been constant white smoke. The mountain backdrop and the dark overcast sky looks like an expressionist painting, a spectrum of tones from deep black to white. It's an image that is simultaneously beautiful and horrifying. When the news of Ali Khamenei's death came, we didn't believe it at first. The next social media confirmed, but it did for all the years of my life and the lives of millions like me were destroyed, and that from the scene in a single moment made me truly angry.
Well, the state funeral of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has been postponed, according to Iranian state media. He was killed in an Israeli attack on Saturday. His son, Mujtaba Khamenei, has reportedly survived. He is the second eldest child and seen as a potential next supreme leader of Iran. Well, the three-day funeral report suggests organisers say the ceremony will be postponed until there is infrastructure in place. No new date for the ceremony, as we've heard a report this weekend of a strike on a girls' school in Iran on Saturday. The funerals of over 100 students killed in the strike in the city of Minab have been held. Drone footage released yesterday shows multiple excavators digging dozens of graves in preparation. Iranian officials said more than 160 people were killed when the school was hit. The building was located near an Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps base. BBC News has not been able to independently verify the Iranian authorities' death toll. Our State Department correspondent Tom Bateman questioned the US Secretary of Defense about the strike.
Thank you. Tom Bateman with the BBC. Can you give us an update on what the administration knows, what you know now about the reported strike on a girls' school in southern Iran on Saturday?
All I can say is that we're investigating that. We, of course, never target civilian targets, but we're taking a look and investigating that. Red tie in front.
Just on the basis that with the information you would have, your reconnaissance abilities, ability to gather information, I mean, it's several days on now. So is there any clarity on whose munition this was?
We're investigating it. Thank you.
Let's take a look at how surrounding regions have been sucked into this war. During that news.
Thank you.
Days on now.
Investigating that.
Thank you. Tom Bateman with the BBC. Can you give us an update on what the administration knows, what you know now about the reported strike on a girls' school in southern Iran on Saturday?
All I can say is that we're investigating that. We, of course, never target civilian targets, but we're taking a look and investigating that. Red tie in front.
Just on the basis that with the information you would have, your reconnaissance abilities, ability to gather information, I mean, it's several days on now. So is there any clarity on whose munition this was?
We're investigating it. Thank you.
Let's take a look at how surrounding regions have been sucked into this war. During that news conference, Pete Hegseth said the US sank an Iranian warship that thought it was safe in international waters. The Pentagon has released footage of the moment a US torpedo struck an Iranian naval ship in the Indian Ocean. The Sri Lankan foreign minister says at least 80 people were killed, more than 30 rescued. Iran is also continuing to carry out attacks across the Middle East. Turkey, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait have all shot down drones headed towards them. In Dubai, one drone reportedly hit the US consulate there. And a missile fell to the ground in an open field in a Kurdish-controlled area of northeastern Syria. Well, BBC Persian's Nafise Konavad is in Baghdad and explains how Iraq, which shares a 1,600-kilometre land border with Iran, is trying to stay out of the crossfire.
Iraq has been trying so hard to not to be dragged into this conflict. Iraq's airspace is closed, and Iraq has sent multiple messages to Tehran, to Washington, and also indirectly to Israel that the airspace of this country should not be used by any party to carry out attacks against each other. But there have been some reports showing that a part of the airspace had been already used by the US and Israeli jets to carry out campaign or refueling their fighter jets over Iraq in this campaign.
So how aligned are Arab countries in the US-Israel war with Iran? Gamal Rushdie is a spokesperson for the Arab League.
Arab countries were not part of this war. Arab countries were not at war with Iran. Actually, to the contrary, some Arab countries, notably Oman, but not only Oman, also Qatar and Egypt and other Arab countries, they played significant roles trying to avoid the situation we are facing now, trying to avoid this war and to provide a kind of a diplomatic path. Oman brokered the dialogue between the United States and Iran, and Arab countries were clear before the war that they are not going to allow their territories to be used in any military action against their territories or airspace to be used in any military action against Iran. And that's why Arab countries actually are extremely frustrated at the Iranian attacks and the Iranian policy, and that it's like no good deed goes unpunished.
And if you're just joining us, this is all you need to know about the Iran war today in 15 minutes. Next, Donald Trump appears to have abandoned all attempts at reaching a solution diplomatically. Yesterday, he criticised Keir Starmer over his refusal to permit the use of UK bases for the initial strikes on Iran. Today, he turned his attention to Spain, something which TikTok users have been talking about today. Trump threatened to impose a full trade embargo on Spain for not allowing the US to use its facilities. This was the Spanish Prime Minister's response.
La posición del gobierno de España se resume en 4 palabras. No.
The Spanish government's position can be summed up in 4 words: no to the war. The world, Europe and Spain have been here before. 23 years ago, another US administration led us to another war in the Middle East, a war that in theory was said to eliminate the weapons of mass destruction of Saddam Hussein and take democracy and safeguard global safety. But in perspective, it had the opposite effect.
Now, the Mediterranean Isle of Cyprus has found itself unexpectedly drawn into the conflict. European countries sent warships and anti-drone defences to Cyprus after a British airbase was hit on the island over the weekend. On YouTube, people have been questioning why it's taking so long for a British warship to be ready to protect the base, which officials saying it won't set sail until next week. HMS Dragon is being loaded with ammunition in Portsmouth, having just recently come out of maintenance.
Despite her departure not being until next week, these preparations are well and truly underway. And of course, she is being sent for defensive purposes, but she does have her own firepower as well. One of the missile batteries she has on board fires around 8 missiles in 10 seconds. She's crewed by at least 200 sailors. And the Ministry of Defense has described her as one of the most advanced anti-aircraft warships in the world. So she's not yet due to sail. When she does, it'll take around 5 days for her to get to the Eastern Mediterranean.
Well, with me now is our international editor, Jeremy Bowen. Hi, Jeremy. So day 5, what's your assessment of where things stand right now?
Things are deepening, things are spreading, more intense. Lebanon has been a real flashpoint today in terms of the intensity of the clashes between Iran's ally Hezbollah and with the Israelis, who've told, I think it's something like 80,000 people to get out of the south and move north, something they've often done in the past when they are planning and doing a big military push into Lebanon. And I think also probably, and it's hard to tell what's going on in Tehran, obviously, but for a growing sense of worry and I'd say probably despair about how long this is going to take, When is it going to end? How is it going to end? Are they going to see it through? What happens to the Iranian regime? These are all big questions. And I think there are, at the moment, no one has any credible answers.
Okay, well, let's just try and dig down into some of them anyway. We heard from Washington earlier, restating the aims here in terms of the degradation of its nuclear ambitions, the strength of its proxies, the strength of its navy, the strength of its missiles. Does the US have the capability to do that, slightly more limited aim, forgetting things like regime change for the moment?
They've clearly, the US and with Israel, have got enormous capacity to do damage. And they are using it. And because the Israelis last year pretty much destroyed all of Iran's air defenses, it's not militarily that challenging for them because there's almost no jeopardy for them in the skies. The skies are virtually open, and they're saying that too. So that's going on. There are differences between, it seems anyway, what the Israelis want out of this and what the Americans want out of this. I think the Israelis, Prime Minister Netanyahu faces elections this year. I think he'd like to go into the election saying, I am the guy who delivered you from the threat, the existential threat of Iran. And after the fact that after the Hamas attacks on 7th of October, his polls went way down because a lot of people blamed him for the security blunders that allowed Hamas its opening. He will say, my reputation is not just restored, it's better than ever as Mr. Security. And also, I think just post-war confusion and violence inside Iran. I think the Americans probably want out of this more quickly. I think Trump probably would like to declare victory. What that victory is going to be, we're really talking about regime change. Perhaps that's because they're realizing that the regime, that they've actually underestimated the resilience of the regime that they have, even without the supreme leader assassinated early on, and his top defense officials and advisors survival in this situation. So, and as for the poor Iranians who are stuck in the middle of all of this, no wonder they're worried about the way the future is going to go, because it doesn't look good.
And on the Iranian strategy of targeting those sites, just talk us through what's the rationale behind it?
Well, spreading the war. I mean, they realize that they cannot match the firepower of the US and Israel combined. Not nearly. So what they are doing is spreading the war as widely as they can, hitting allies of not just of the US, but those Arab countries as well that have got really quite close with Israel. They've even hit Oman, which is the main intermediary normally between Iran and the West. They have made into targets countries that were trying to stop the war actually happening. So those countries, those Gulf Arab countries particularly, are angry, upset, furious. Some of them have quite considerable military capacities. Will they use them? That's one big question. Will they give the Americans or the Israelis more basing rights and to use those bases against Iran? That's another question. And I think what the Iranians are trying to do is to disrupt those plans by spreading the pain as much as is possible, closing the Straits of Hormuz, but spiking oil prices, putting the cost of petrol up, and gasoline prices are a big electoral issue in America. And of course, they also have elections this year, trying to find ways essentially for Trump to say that's enough, because if they're still there, the regime, when Trump says that's enough, they'll say it's a victory.
This has just pop it on your wrist, and in 3 seconds, it accurately tracks 24 vital health stats.
right. Thank you very much, folks. Here's one of our recordings. Beautiful number called Black and Blue. That's cold empty bed, springs hard as lead, feel like golden dead, wished I was dead. What did I do to be so black and blue? Even the mouse ran from my house. On you too. What did I do to be so black and blue? Yes, I'm right inside, but that don't help my case. 'Cause I can't hide what is in my face. But that does I say. How would it end? Ain't got a friend. My only sin is in my skin. What did I do to be so black and blue?
On a P&O Cruises holiday, I get the best view of the fjords from inside the fjords.
Norwegian Fjords Holidays from 749 P&O Cruises. Holiday like never before.
I'm joined first, though, by Andrew Marr, presenter of Tonight with Andrew Marr on LBC, as I'm sure you know. Andrew, you and I have sat in this studio and outside Westminster Abbey not that long ago, reporting on the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, the funeral of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, and then the coronation. And I remember you wondering, or the two of us wondering out loud and together about what the reign of Charles would bring. And it has been momentous on a number of fronts, but nothing compares to this day, does it?
I think there's a bit of a parallel with politics here, Sheila. At the time of the election, we thought, here comes a kind of slightly boring, grey, competent prime minister. Politics is going to go dull for a while. What are we going to find to talk about? And it hasn't quite proved that way. And I think the same is true of the reign of Charles III. We thought, well, he's not a terribly exciting figure. He doesn't have the historical resonance of his mother, but he'll be quiet, calm, competent, and it has been complete mayhem. This is clearly the biggest crisis the royal family has faced, I think, since the abdication crisis in 1936.
And I suppose on the personal level, focusing in on Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and his relationship to those members of the royal family, again, important to stress, he denied any wrongdoings, the arrest that takes its course and the law takes its course. But that I can't get away from this statement that the King put out earlier on today. You talk about the abdication crisis, and it's fair to say, isn't it, that Edward VIII was frozen out big time along with his wife, really big time along with his wife. That freezing out has been going on for some time, but the statement seems today to be colder than ever, I think.
Absolutely icy, and I have to say, I think rightly so. Charles is doing everything he can. But in the end, you can't distance yourself from your brother too much. You can't completely pretend that he wasn't part of the family. He didn't have the same upbringing. And one of the great ironies of all of this, I think, is that why did he have the job of trade envoy in the first place? Let's ask ourselves that. And I think a big part of the reason is that Andrew, since his involvement in the army and the Falklands campaign, in the Royal Air Force, I should say, and the Falklands campaign, hasn't really had much to do, or indeed, by most people's standards, anything to do. And he was a bit of an embarrassment, the heir and the spare and all of that. He's been the spare all his life. And I think there was a sense, give him this job as trade envoy, it'll keep him out of trouble and therefore be good for the royal family. Well, that's gone well, hasn't it? And we are now in this astonishing situation. I mean, I mentioned Edward VIII, but Edward VIII never faced criminal charges. There was no prospect of Edward VIII going to prison for life, which is what the ultimate sentence would be if Andrew was convicted on this particular charge. It's different in that regard. But of course, the abdication crisis was, in the end, all about sex. And this is, I think, Ruth Davidson, we've just been hearing on the news, Gordon Brown are on the same page now. This is ultimately about Andrew's sexual behaviour and the way he was drawn into the Epstein web. It is a bit weird that we're talking about his job as a trade envoy and secrets he passed on to Epstein because of that, because they're absolutely right. That is not really the heart of this.
Again, it's important to stress he has repeatedly denied any wrongdoing when it comes to those sexual allegations laid against him, but you are absolutely right to say, and others are right to say, that that has been the story that's been bearing down on the reputation of the royal family because of him.
If he was never inveigled or entangled into the Epstein sex trafficking web, and yes, of course, he says he wasn't and all the rest of it, but if he had never met Epstein under those circumstances, Epstein would have no influence over him whatever. Andrew is one of the very eminent people around Epstein who never needed the money, particularly, though he's always wanted money. And so if you take away the sexual allegations, and he would have had no reason whatever to pass anything to Epstein. And therefore, that's why I say you can't disentangle, put a pair of shears between the two sides of this story. So I do think, in the end, the abdication crisis was when the British public looked at the royal family, who they had sanctified for so long, and thought the man, this is a big difference, of course, who was then king, simply didn't have the moral character to carry out that role. And I think clearly people have looked at Andrew and says he does not have the moral character to be part of the royal family. That doesn't mean that the current king is contaminated personally by this. But this sense, all our lives we've been told to look up to the royal family because they were the best of us.
An exemplar.
They were the They were the ideal family. They were the good people. And if the things going wrong in our family, we could look at how the royal family were dealing with the same kind of problems, and so on and so on. But if they are disgraceful, or if some of them are disgraceful, then that whole idea is blown apart.
And
now,
can I come in again on the
This tit.
Dave?
Listen to the way they communicate.
Dave, you're on mute.
Nest. Together we'll build.
Right. Your mama deserves something special for Mother's Day. So go to funkypigeon.com for personalized cards.
And photo booths.
Ooh, that's double funky. Funkettes, tell her where to go.
Funkypigeon.com.
Give a funkypigeon.com.
Come in again on the abdication and Edward VIII, because I think that you're absolutely right to draw a distinction between the things that were going on at the time, and one facing an arrest and one not, obviously, in those days. But what, from the monarchy's perspective, what had to be done was to distance, almost amputate that person from them. And I think that's what we're witnessing here. Whatever the law finds out, whatever ends up being investigated fully or in part or in whole, that's what we're witnessing from the royal perspective, isn't it? An amputation of him.
I think that's a very good point, Sheila. The monarchy is many things, but it is a ruthless institution in its own interests. And the interests of individual people and relationships matter not at all compared to the monarchy surviving and restoring itself. You saw that with Harry and Meghan, frankly. Never mind Andrew. Some people even say it's a rather inhuman organisation, but it's inhuman in the same way that any big, long-lasting organisation will be ruthless when it has to be. And I think also the papacy is another good example of that. If you look back at the history of the papacy and some of the ruthless and brutal things
Don't get me started.
have been done to get. No, I won't get you started on that, Sheila. I can see the flash in your eye. I won't go too far down that route.
Oh no, you can. It's just maybe not today. Not today.
The problem has always been the same, that this is meant to be an almost superhuman, certainly above society institution, and yet it depends entirely on human beings and therefore their foibles and their failures as well as their successes.
And I think it's really interesting that you brought us to that point in the discussion, because my take, for what it's worth, is that the only way it survives now and into the next decades, when William becomes king, if William becomes king, the only way it survives is for all of that above the rest of us nonsense to be thrown out. Now, to be fair to him, he has done a fair bit of that, hasn't he? He's still got the privilege, he's still got the wealth, he's still got the titles, he's going to be the king. But he and his wife have thrown out a bit of that and brought people into the pain and the foibles of their humanity as well, to a degree. And I guess that's a big change. You would never have got that in the 50s, before that in the 30s. No, never.
No. He's fallen a long way down the slope, Sheila. It reminds me slightly of the Mitford family, which, if you remember, they had a grand country house. And then every few years they moved to another one, and it was always smaller and smaller and smaller. And in a sense, it's been the case with Andrew. He's moved from huge accommodation to smaller accommodation, fewer servants, and he's ended up in a smallish farmhouse. And he may well end up, of course, if this goes badly for him, in a prison cell, which is in itself an absolutely extraordinary thought, given where he started. Imagine being surrounded by all that privilege and adulation all your life and ending up in a prison cell. That would make this one of the most sensational stories in British history, frankly.
And I guess for the king, there is something of a breathing space, because the law is the law and it must be given the space to operate properly and all of the rest of it. But I'll go back to where you began, which is that the sexual allegations against him, and even just the sexual stories around him in relation to Virginia Giuffre and others on Epstein Island, they are far from concluded. from the royal family's perspective, are they?
I think we both know, because we're both old hacks, that we are at the beginning of the story, not the end of it at this stage. There's a long, long way to go yet. People who say this is the end of the royal family, I think are half right, in the sense that the danger for the royal family is not some kind of revolution or upsurge from below and being kicked physically out of their palaces and the rest of it. The danger is a weary sense of boredom, mild disgust, disbelief spreading through the population. We just don't want to hear about them. At the time when most British people don't care about royal stories, don't want to hear about the royal family, then the palaces may be there, the titles may be there, but in its essence, the monarchy is over. And I think that's the real danger for the king now, that we shrug, we move on. Of course, the news cycle is very fast these days, and there's always another story, there's always another scandal to talk about. But actually, up and down the country, normal, ordinary people who once would have had flags out of their houses when the Queen was in the area and would regard themselves as loyalists, loyal monarchists, really can't be bothered anymore. That's the danger.
It is, without a doubt, a danger, and it's a danger it's faced before, and worse, arguably, I suppose, because people often look back further than Edward VIII. They look back to George V and say he is the one who understood that to survive, people had to be interested in them and want to see them and want to read about them and hear about them. And therefore, they had to be visible, they had to be up close, they had to be in your face, they had to be meeting and greeting you, going to your workplace, going to where you are. That's, in a sense, where the modern Windsor family began, isn't it?
Quite right. And to use sort of antiquated, old-fashioned language, he realised they had to be a bourgeois family or a middle-class family. They had to look and sound like well-off middle-class British people everywhere. And that, of course, I mentioned Edward VIII. What about Edward VII? Had the British public known what he was up to in the bedroom and indeed in carriages and in various rooms around Europe, then he would have been in the same sort of status as Andrew is today. I mean, he was an absolute old roue. But those days, of course, we didn't know about it.
You chose a beautiful word there. I kept thinking of a word, realising I couldn't say it on national radio. So thanks. It was good to talk to you. Andrew Marr.
Double YFL. Anthony Lino, the girl say, box her rubber, she no want no flowers. She want feel up the Rasta powers. Wash it up, send it to Dr. Howard. She still want be one of the Rasta lovers. Box her rubber, she no want no flowers. She want feel up the Rasta powers. Wash it up, send it to Dr. Howard. She still want be one of the Rasta lovers. You remember this girl from Kingston? She just call me, say she want the king son. Me drink some roots, me never drink rum. Me tell her the kitty she fi bring come. Now she a request the work, no income. And she don't get test now. I be at me. Double YFL. Anthony B. Lino, the girl say, box her rubber, she no want no flowers. She want feel up the Rasta powers. Mash it up, send it to Dr. Howard. She still want be one of the Rasta lovers. Box her rubber, she no want no flowers. She want feel up the Rasta powers. Mash it up, send it to Dr. Howard. She still want be one of the Rasta lovers. You remember this girl from Kingston? She just call me, say she want the king's son. Me drink some roots, me never drink rum. Me tell her the kitty she fi bring come. Now she a request the work no income, and she don't get test no symptom. Have me white but she still a get fling down. Put it on hard, make rubbers and skin bun. He book her inna the city some years back. Too stiff titty them time that she no wear locks. Book her inna the car over the gearbox. Have it 2 foot on the dashboard in a earmax. Slam the chick one like she get beer back. Squeeze her throat now she want get the beer back. Pop down we no play that. So when you see the Rasta man, you better wear black. And bring her box of rubber, she no want no flowers. She want feel up the Rasta powers. Mash it up, send it to Dr. Howard. She still want be one of the Rasta lovers. Box of rubber, she no want no flowers. She want feel up the Rasta powers. Mash it up, send it to Dr. Howard. She still want be one of the Rasta lovers. See? She got the kitty every man a dream about. So me live up in a that like me dream house. No kissy even though she have a clean mouth. Big broom make she ball and scream out. Man straight Rasta no go the lean route. She say me love it make she want be me queen now. Puff the chalice blow the weed out. She say tell Billy me a the real goat. Rasta no in a slackness. Full of girls, so we not feel back fist. I be a hotness pan the restless. She say push back, cause she got this. Flexible, yeah, she make me back twist. She a wine like her every day she practice. She say me a the first man ever match this. So me make she scream out like a actress. Box her up, but she no want no flowers. She want feel up the Rasta powers. Mash it up, send it to Dr. Howard. She still want be one of the Rasta lovers. Box her up, but she no want no flowers.
U.S. official telling Fox thousands of Iraqi Kurds have launched a ground offensive in Iran. Decimated, destroyed, defeated. All words the Pentagon used to describe Iran's various military forces on day 5 of Operation Epic Fury. Moments ago, President Trump touting its success.
So we're in a very strong position now, and their leadership is just rapidly going. Everybody that seems to want to be a leader, they end up dead. And it's an amazing thing that's taking place. Their missiles are being wiped out rapidly. Their launchers are being wiped out. They're attacking their neighbors. They're attacking their, in some cases, allies, or not so long ago, allies that on us if we let them.
The Secretary of War says it's just the beginning.
We are just getting started. We are accelerating, not decelerating. Iran's capabilities are evaporating by the hour, while American strength grows fiercer, smarter, and utterly dominant. More bombers and more fighters are arriving just today. We can sustain this fight easily for as long as we need to.
The White House reporting more than 17,000 Americans have returned home safely from the Middle East, and repeating the president's motivation for the operation.
This is a rogue terrorist regime that has been threatening the United States, our allies, and our people for 47 years. This is a president who has been remarkably consistent on this issue, that Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. And the president tried peace through diplomacy, exhaustively and extensively. He and his team gave it their best go, and the president ultimately came to the determination of that peace was not a pursuable path. The Iranian regime, they want death, they want destruction, they want to kill Americans, and that's unacceptable to this president. It's intolerable to him as commander-in-chief.
Here's the conflict by the numbers so far. The U.S. has hit over 2,000 Iranian targets and destroyed more than 20 Iranian naval vessels. Iran has fired more than 500 ballistic missiles and over 2,000 drones. Reuters reports that defense executives are planning to visit the White House to talk about accelerating weapons production amid fears of diminishing stockpiles. But that is a fear that today was dismissed by General Kane.
The throttle is coming up, as the secretary said, as opposed to ramping down. This will allow us to maintain consistent pressure on the adversary over the coming days, disrupt their launch timelines, and impose cost every day around the clock. We have sufficient precision munitions for the task at hand, both on the offense and defense.
Meantime, Israel's Air Force has struck in Iran with over 5,000 munitions since the start of the operation. The impact on Iran's stockpile is already tangible. Its ballistic missile launches down 88% since day one and down 23% in just the last 24 hours. One-way attack drone shots are down 73%. A key objective in this conflict for President Trump, wiping out Iran's Navy. Today, it appears he is closer to that goal after an American submarine sunk Iran's prized ship with a torpedo. It's one of the few instances of a sub doing so since World War II. Hey, it's Will.
But we don't think that's all the files the DOJ is holding. In fact, we know for sure it's not. We can show you that only a tiny fraction of data has been released to the public, which means we still don't have all the information about Jeffrey Epstein, the full details of his sex trafficking ring and who knew what and when. And that matters because this is a story about a predator, a pedophile, and his victims who've been failed for decades.
What a massive cover-up this has been and continues to be.
Many believe that Epstein's global club is still being protected from true accountability. But these releases could be changing that. The brother of the king has been arrested. That is a seismic moment in this story.
You have to wonder what's in the files we haven't seen.
So let's talk about the missing terabytes of files we know the US government is still keeping from the public. And while we think this is still just the beginning of the Epstein scandal. So how did we get here? Last July, the DOJ and the FBI released this memo saying that they had conducted an exhaustive review of all the files related to Jeffrey Epstein and that they had more than 300 gigabytes of data. And at the time, they said that they'd released all the files they were going to and that no one else was under investigation. But we revealed in a foresight the next month that we thought the DOJ and the FBI had terabytes more data than they were admitting to. Since then, Congress has forced the Trump administration to release the data they have on Epstein, and files in December and at the very end of January. A data drop totaling around 300 gigabytes.
This review is over.
But that very release proves that we were right all along, because buried in the data was evidence that the DOJ and the FBI know they have terabytes of evidence on file. Look at these emails from June 2020. I'm just going to zoom in here. Now, investigators with the FBI and the New York District Attorney's Office, they're talking about storage devices being seized with a capacity of somewhere around 40 up to 50 terabytes, and that they expect the data on those devices to be in total somewhere between 20 and 40 terabytes. But now let's go forward 5 years and we're in March 2025. Another set of emails discussing the data. This time it's been shared between the Washington and New York FBI field offices. And now they're saying we are looking at a total of approximately 14.6 terabytes of archive data to unpack. So here it is in black and white. Officials from the DOJ and the FBI saying that they're dealing with approximately 15 terabytes of data, potentially meaning that 98% of the Epstein files they had access to are still unreleased. Those terabytes of data are the culmination of an extraordinary amount of investigation, including a 2005 police raid on Epstein's house in Florida that led to his 2008 conviction, the search of his New York City house, one of the largest private residencies in Manhattan after his 2019 arrest. And the evidence the FBI and Palm Beach police gathered revealed a man obsessed with surveillance and data, computers, hard drives, servers, all seized, all offering potential insight into his world of criminality and abuse. And it left law enforcement with a huge amount of data to organize. The Attorney General Pam Bondi has said that more than 500 attorneys and reviewers went through the documents ahead of the release deadline set by Congress last year, and that the files were full of duplicates and repeats.
We've released more than 3 million pages, including a
process as a success, proof that they're delivering on their campaign promises.
We're doing everything we can based on the tight time frame and over 3 million pages that we released that Donald Trump signed for pure transparency.
But what messy this whole process has been. Investigators and prosecutors admitting themselves that, at the beginning at least, the process of organizing all this data was a nightmare. Just look at these messages from early 2020 where officials are talking about just like how much data there is here. Look at this stuff in red. Many of the files are too large to open